is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 514. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me online all the way from Denver, Colorado, the busy bee himself, it's Scott-Vargas.
Yeah, I guess that would be accurate. In that I'm making a lot of honey. Wait.
Whoa! You're super sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're going to be distributing some of this honey to our listeners? This isn't going anywhere. I don't like where this is going at
all. No, let's
why don't we revert back to, how's the weather? Is it still snowing or?
No, it was just the one day of snow, and that's it.
And then it was 70 on the weekend and everything was fine. All right. Well,
yeah,
I'll never figure it out. But here, it's been nice the whole time. We've got a jam-packed show for you. We're going to be doing our Q&A episode and also a follow-up on the Aggro stuff from last week that we get to kind of touch base back on again. Before we do, though, our sponsor, channelfireball.com. A couple of things to mention about CFB this week. They've got a whole heck of a lot going on over there. First things first, Command Fest, Seattle. That is going to actually have coverage at it. When did you say the dates for it were? The 30th, 31st, and 1st?
It's November 1st through November 3rd, so that Friday through Sunday in Seattle. And yeah, we're going to have coverage for that. There's a lot of cool stuff going on the Command Fest, but even if you're not going to be able to make it, you actually can tune in to twitch.tv/channelfireball for coverage featuring the one and only Asian Avenger himself.
Cool.
Yeah, Krim, who's an awesome streamer, by the way. So, and he plays a ton of Commander.
So I wonder, that's cool. I'll have to try to check that out. I might actually be able to swing by that event. I think I'm in town that weekend. So I'm not the biggest Commander player, but I mean, I love Magic. I love any way that people enjoy it, and probably swing by and say hi. Maybe, but if not, I'll make sure to check out the coverage that starts at 9 a.m. Pacific time. Also, the buy list. Boy, we mentioned this last week, but this is big news here for people who've got that big stack of rares sitting there. The channelfireball.com/buy list is where you can check this out. I've often talked on the show about trading your cards back in because you get 30% trade-in bonus. It's now 40% trade-in bonus on your if you're trading in those cards, which is just awesome. I mean, that is insane. That is really like a big level up as far as being able to just keep on playing this game that we all love. It's expensive. We know this is not one of those hobbies that you can just buy one thing one time and then just enjoy it forever. Like many good things, it requires upkeep, and this is one way that you can help take the edge off.
It's not like fishing or golf where you buy one little thing and you're just set forever. But
is that how those work?
or like watch collecting, you buy a Casio and you're good. Like,
why would you need more than one, right? Yeah, and check it out, channelfireball.com/buy list, so you can see maybe you've got some old cards that you've been sitting on for a while, and you think, this might be the time to do it. You can trade them in for a whole deck or for some sealed product or whatever you need over at channelfireball.com. And if you want to see the buy list specifically, it's /buy list. Also, the Patreon. This is how this is part of the equation for content creators these days. And I think it's a real blessing that this thing exists, because Patreon, before the days of Patreon, it was much, much more difficult to set up a cool way for people to support you. But while it was like official and it worked and it was repeatable, rather than having to kind of duct tape together a bunch of solutions or whatever. Now we've got Patreon, patreon.com/limited resources. If you want to support this show, that is the place to go do it. You get some cool bonuses and perks, including if you're a patron at any level, you will have access to the Q&A posts. So I'll post on there for shows like today. And this is where we get our questions from our most dedicated listeners over on the Patreon, and they feed these questions. And I am consistently amazed at the awesome questions that our people come up with, and you're going to get to hear a bunch of them on the show this week. Let's do a crack-a-pack here. Going to take an aggro card out of this pack, Luis?
Well, we'll see. Okay.
I'm going to say you're not, but we'll find out. Well, this one's pretty good. Trapped in the Tower. That's the kind of it's the twist on a pacifism. Mm-hmm.
It's a arrest. It stops it from attacking, blocking, or using activated abilities. But you can't put it on a flyer. And one interaction, Fairy Guide Mother really just takes this card's lunch or eats its lunch.
Brutal. Mm-hmm.
So This is a fine card. It's definitely, it's not bad, but it's not the best white common, not by a long shot. And it's an okay card to first pick. I guess I wouldn't be super thrilled.
Yeah, still, it's the best white removal spell. So there you go. Malevolent Noble, 1 and a black, 2/2. You can pay 2 mana and sack an artifact or another creature to put a +1/+1 counter on it. It's a serviceable 2-drop.
Yeah, nothing too exciting.
Nope. Scorching Dragonfire. Here's another good removal spell. So 1 and a red instant does 3 damage target creature or planeswalker. It gets exiled if it dies. Yep. I'm in on that.
Yeah, certainly that's the pick starting off there.
Yeah. Fling. No. Giant's Skewer. It's about as slow as a giant. It's 1 and a black for an equipment. It's got equip 3. Creature gets +2/+1, and if it hits a creature, it does damage to a creature, you get a food. It is not unplayable, but slow.
Cauldron Familiar.
Yes, there you go. You either take it or take it. It's up to you. Slow. Very, very slow, but I have found it to be serviceable. I mean, you can play one in your deck and not be
serviceable is exactly the word I would use. It's not great, but it definitely is passable.
It's not going to bump Scorching Dragonfire, though. Sporecap Spider, 2 and a green, 1/5 reach. No. All right. Well, here's one of the more talked about cards, if not the most talked about card in the set, at least for limited players. It's Merfolk Secret Keeper. Boy, I got to tell you, we asked for screenshots and stuff of aggro decks, and people send them to us all the time of all their different types of decks. And basically every deck that we've got sent that wasn't an aggro deck this last week has had 6 Merfolk Secret Keepers in it on Arena.
So it's funny because it was actually kind of bad timing where last week we recorded our episode and then the Arena bots actually got updated basically the same day.
Yeah, we were bummed, yeah.
That said, Merfolk Secret Keeper is still endemic. Like, you still just see tons and tons of Secret Keepers. They are not keeping very many secrets to themselves, actually.
Secret is out, yeah.
And I still feel like, somewhat anecdotally, I play against Mill probably once every third match or so, maybe a slightly bit more than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and this is an issue, right? Having played almost exclusively on Magic Online for this set, that has not been an issue. The card exists. You do see it. I've never had a deck with more than 3 or 4, and even early in the format when people didn't really know yet. So, yeah, it's starting to kind of show its warts there, and it's an issue. But at any rate, I'm not taking it over Scorching Dragonfire here.
No, but I think Merfolk Secret Keeper is quite good. The fact that it mills your opponent but also gives you an 0/4 blocker does shore up a lot of the issues that a mill deck historically has had. So worth noting, not as good as Scorching Dragonfire.
Yeah. Shining Armor has been a little dull for me.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, just straight up bad, yeah. The issue, of course, is that it's an equipment that gives +0, +2, and Vigilance, which are both okay abilities, but what you want in your white Knights deck is something that kills your opponent quicker, and Shining Armor does not do that. Garen Briggs Squires, the 1 and a green 2/2. Whenever you cast a creature spell with it that has an adventure, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Been pretty disappointed with that guy. All right, uncommons. Actually, we've got one more common at foil. It is a Garen Briggs Paladin. It's your boy. 4 and a green 4/4 adamant like gets +1/+1 counter. Yeah, you said it's basically a questing beast, right? It's just
it's essentially the common questing beast.
Yeah. So a fine card, but again, I think Scorching Dragonfire is where I would be coming out of the commons. Now, usually, though, that changes, and let's see if it's the case here. First up, Mad Ratter. This is the 3 and a red 1/2. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, you get 2 1/1 black rat creature tokens. Which, yes, I would take that over Scorching Dragonfire, actually.
I don't know that I would. I don't know that I would kick off the draft doing that, just because Mad Ratter, it's not literally a red-blue card, because if you get enough merchants, you can play it in whatever color combination you want, but it points pretty strongly towards being red-blue and towards needing support, whereas Scorching Dragonfire is just a great card, so I think I might just Scorching Dragonfire here.
Okay, so I'm going for the upside with the upside, but potential with taking on the risk by going for the Ratter currently. And Luis is keeping it safe with the solid double of the Scorching Dragonfire. I respect that. Elite Headhunter. This is the black-red hybrid. So 4 black or red mana. It's a 2/3 menace, and you can pay 3 black and or red mana and sacrifice another creature or an artifact to have it do 2 damage to a creature or planeswalker. Funny, I have yet to play this card.
I have lost to it, but I have not actually played it. I do not think it's a very good card.
Okay, so what's your knock on it?
It's too much mana to do too little of an effect. Like,
okay,
the way it's priced, you don't want it just for the body because it's not impressive enough there. But its ability also is really expensive to use and not like super impactful. If its ability cost 1 or 2 mana to use, it'd be a completely different story. But it just doesn't.
Yeah, and it costs 3. Yeah, it's quite a bit. I guess it's just 3 straight up if you're in those colors anyway. But still, 3's a lot. Next up. All right, this is good. We've got some aggro stuff here. Inspiring Veteran. This is the red-white 2/2 that gives other knights you control +1/+1.
Yeah, I'm still taking Scorching Dragonfire. It's the same complaint as Mad Ratter, where this pushes you into 2 colors and into knights already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you don't want to be pushing that direction. I agree. I have it Mad Ratter, Dragonfire, then Inspiring Veteran. Aha! I told you you're not going to take an aggro card. It's Feasting Troll King.
Wow, Feasting Troll King can go in green aggro decks just fine. This card is just amazing. This is green 2 for 7/6 vigilance. Is that right?
Trample.
And trample?
Yep. It's got it all.
When it enters the battlefield, you make 3 food, and then if you played it from your hand, and then you can sack 3 food to bring it back from your graveyard.
Yeah, to the battlefield and during your turn still. Yeah, Feasting Troll King is tough to cast. It is only 6 mana, right? It's not the amount isn't the problem, but the quadruple green is a little bit of a pain, but that's fine. The payoff here is devastating.
I mean, this is an amazing card. It's a 7/6 that they have to kill twice, and even then, your other food can potentially bring it back. Also, it's a 7/6 that gives you a bunch of food, and so maybe you don't. They don't kill the Troll King, but you just get to eat all the food to gain a bunch of life. So it's a pretty fantastic card, and certainly where I would start. I mean, it is a bomb, and my guess is most of the time you draft the Troll King, you don't end up literal mono green, but you try to end up with a 12, 13 forest in your deck, maybe splashing. Like I've splashed like 4 mountains for a Scorching Dragonfire and a red cap melee, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. I would definitely first pick it here. By the way, I've got another one of these collector booster things, but we're going to save that for a different. We'll do that next time.
Sounds good.
Next show or something, because I've got that one in there. We'll give that one away and then do another one and give that stuff away too. Maybe we'll get something sweet out of it. Okay, so last week we ended the show, our main topic on the show, by talking about aggro. We were talking about aggro decks, and we had a challenge to see if maybe aggro was better than we thought it was, or to try to figure out what worked for aggressive decks in the format. And that was to both of us and then also to our listeners who responded awesome. We got tons and tons of screenshots and records and stuff for the different types of aggro decks. Now, obviously, this is not a particularly scientific way to do it because we're basically telling people to send us stuff when it did work rather than
no one sent us the 2-3 aggro list.
Right. That didn't happen. But it is still useful because we can start to see patterns, right, among our Twitter feeds about, hey, look, people keep getting to 7 wins or getting to 5 wins depending on what they were doing. Because most of these screenshots came from Arena, I will say. It's red-black. That keeps popping up over and over. Or we can look at them a little closer and say, hey, this one happened to have a rare and 4 really great uncommons. Like maybe that's the key, but people were smart and noted many times, hey, this is basically all commons with a few decent uncommons and, a random rare thrown in there. But this wasn't me drawing my mythic every round and winning. This was, a legitimately good deck. So what are our takeaways? What did you learn? What's your take on the situation now?
Well, one thing I do like about aggro is it really combats mill quite nicely. So I found I was pleasantly surprised by that. The other is that combat tricks are a lot more important than I initially thought. Because one of the really important things that you have to do when you're playing an aggressive deck is you got to punch through those Merfolk Secret Keepers and Curious Pairs, sometimes Sporecap Spider. Just like there is a lot of low power, high toughness creatures. So cards like Rimrock Knight, the 3/1 that can't block that you cast as a red +2/+0 trick, that was really good. Way better than I initially had thought. Because there's a lot of them blocking 2/2s with 0/4s or them blocking, your like 3/2s or 3/3s with 1/5 sort of deal. Where often that creature, that the Rimrock is just going to give you a 2-for-1 because even though +2/+0 looks like a trade combat trick, a lot of times it's not actually going to be a trade. They're just blocking with a big dork. So Combat tricks are important, especially one of the things that aggro has an advantage here is all the combat tricks just about are card advantage because you have, Garenbrig Carver, Rimrock Knight, the Silverflame Squire that are all a combat trick plus an adventure creature. So you can end up in a spot where you spend a couple turns using combat tricks trading off, but then also having 4 or 5 threats at the end of it instead of like 2 or 3.
Right. You get to keep the coffers stocked.
So combat tricks way better. It's also, I found it really important to have like persistent damage sources because it wasn't as much like you burn them out because food made it a lot harder to kind of like some formats aggro is going to get you down to like 5 or 6 and then use a burn spell to finish you off or a falter effect. I didn't find that to be that effective here because when you stabilize, or when they stabilized rather, often it was really easy for them to have a golden egg if they were blue-white or if they're black-green, any number of food-making cards. So it wasn't like, I got them to 4, now I need to draw my, Searing Javelin or whatever, Slaying Fire, I guess it's called now. But because what will happen is you'll get them to 4 and they have more food than you have burn spells, they'll find one of those first. So it's important to have flyers. It's important to have equipment, like cards that give you these persistent threats. So, the Steel Claw Lance, the red-black equipment that gives +2/+2 and equips for 1 on a night, super important. Ardenvale,
so good.
Ardenvale Tactician is just the nuts. I think it's the best aggro card in the set that's not at high rarity. It's the best aggro common in the set. This is the 1 white 2/3 flyer that also has 1 and a white instant tap 2 creatures as an adventure. And I just snapped up as many of those as I could. And then another thing that I actually found to be a little more effective than initially thought was just going under because there is a lot of removal, but it's kind of slow. And especially since if not everyone's adapting, your strategy of casting so tinies at every opportunity, like I believe that in the world where you play against aggro more than half the time, so tiny is better than Charm Sleep. I found myself losing to so tiny way more. Like, if they cast Charm Sleep on my 2-drop, my Flutterfox or something, I don't care. I spent 2 mana, they spent 3, I probably even got to hit it. But when they tiny your creature on turn 2, like at the end of their turn 1, it just feels like, oh, really? Like it just feels, it kind of feels like you lost the game, even though obviously.
Because you never even got running, right? No. You never even got that start to build off of. So. Yeah, it's interesting. What I've noticed is that I really sync up with what you're saying about getting under them and going quick. Like, I kind of had to let go of the notion of trying to save my removal for better creatures and instead use it on their stupid Merfolk Secret Keeper. Just Reave Soul it and get in for 4, right? Because what I found is that the games often hinged on this inflection point of, does my opponent have enough breathing room to sacrifice their food? If I can put them in a position where sacrificing their food means they don't get to cast a spell this turn and I just get to kill them anyway, that's where I want to be. That requires a pretty strong amount of aggression. Like, you cannot dirtle around, and it means you have to be pressuring their life total early, where oftentimes, for example, if I have 2 2/2s and they have an 0/4, I'd be content to just attack for the 2 damage, build out my board, and save my Reave Soul for something better. I've found that if you lean a little more on the aggressive side and just sort of bite the bullet and use a removal spell on their junkie card or their adventure creature, something that you just feel a little bit of loss of value where you're a little bit like, crap, you can start to mitigate that, where I've beaten people in this last week when they had food tokens that they didn't have time to sacrifice. Or if they took the time to sacrifice them, it cost them developing their board. And then long term, of course, that's not going to work out for them. It basically is like playing a fog, right? It negates one attack step, but now they're too far behind.
If they're in a position
to catch up,
where they're sacking food instead of playing a blocker, it doesn't really change much. Like, like you said, it doesn't really actually gain you life, because if you're facing down 6 power and you can sack 2 food or play a blocker, either way, you're preventing some amount of damage. But when you sack the food, you're just going to be taking that damage again the next turn, which is why I was hammering on having persistent sources of damage. So, flyers or hard to block creatures, first strikers, whatever. Because the situation where they stall the board, then sack the food, yes, the food is very effective then. The situation where you pressure them so much they have the choice between playing a 5-drop or sacking a food, like, yes, that will make it a lot harder for them to really get leverage in the game.
Yeah, the one deck that I really didn't want to face is, of course, the one that we were talking about last week that we like to have, which is blue-black. because of so tiny, and then the full suite of removal spells in addition to that really does make it tough. And they even get incidental food. When they bake something into a pie and then are able to utilize the food to gain the life too, it's just so rough, right? I mean, on an installment plan, 6 mana to destroy any creature and gain 3 life is like really tough for a good aggro deck to beat. And it's interesting because I think the best one that I drafted was black-green, which I didn't expect it to be. I was trying to be aggressive and trying to take stuff that leaned me in an aggressive direction. And it actually worked out really well. But the reason for it is twofold. One of them is I had either 1 or 2 copies of, I can't remember what it's called, but it's the hybrid card, right? The 4/2.
Yeah. And Deathless Knight.
Deathless Knight. And when you gain life for the first time, it comes back.
Yeah.
And that ended up being a really strong aggressive engine because at 4 power, it's really nice to be able to run over the things that you were talking about, the 1/3s and the 0/4s that are sitting there, and it can just keep smashing into them over and over. But what also happened is I picked up 2 epic downfalls.
Well, that's smart.
Right. And I mean, I got lucky that they both came to me in pack 3, but it was interesting because before I picked those 2 cards up, I was lamenting a little bit. In fact, this is actually a video for CFB, but I was lamenting a little bit that it was, that I thought my deck was quite medium. And after picking those up, my deck felt awesome. Like being able to just, to have that kind of efficiency bump was the difference to me between my deck feeling like, and feeling like, no, I can do stuff with this, right? Now, look, you're not going to get 2 awesome, one of the best uncommons or whatever every draft, but that is how close it felt to me. Like where that actually swung the pendulum back in my direction. I was able to, utilize those, to clear away blockers in a really great way. So maybe these decks are really close. Maybe that is the difference, is getting a couple of key uncommons. And I'm not talking about the obscene ones. I'm just talking about the, I need to get a blocker out of the way style ones,
Yeah. And I think that, there are the tools to win here. I think part of it, Revenge of Ravens going last pick on Arena, which is no longer the case, by the way, that did get updated, did suppress aggro a little bit there. And the commonality of Merfolk Secret Keeper, because I mean the deck with 6 Secret Keepers is good against aggro. It has all these 0/4s, even if they're using combat tricks to do it, they're getting slowed down so much. So I don't think that's necessarily just the solution.
So based on what you played and what we saw and stuff, what are the archetypes? How do they break down as far as the way you see it?
I like red, black, and red, white knights. I think those are the better aggro colors. Basically, you get to use the night synergies that are built in, and those all work together really well. Some of them, at a higher rarity is Bell the Brawl and the Steel Claw Lance and what have you. But a lot of the good aggressive creatures just happen to be knights. And then you use either red or black or both as removal because, all the common removal is really good. Bake into Pie is still great. Reeve Soul, Scorching Dragonfire. I mean, Reeve Soul kills all these high toughness creatures too, by the way. Like, it does a very, very good work against 1/5s. And
2/5s.
Yeah, basically you want a good amount of ways to punch your guys through and to have a pretty low curve. And then I actually found it to be pretty effective. I think that kind of tasking myself to draft them was really good. Actually, my favorite deck I drafted was a green-white adventure deck, which I think is also very good. Edgewall Innkeeper is just a busted card. And once you have Innkeeper, all the adventure creatures, which again you normally want anyway, you want your Fairy Guide Mothers, Garenbrig Carbers, etc. in your deck. And then once they all start cantripping, obviously it's great. Ardenvale Tactician is still fantastic. I found Fairy Guide Mother to be better than it looked as well. Just being able to get an extra, sometimes off the adventure you get 5 or 6 damage just out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. But then also if you play a 1/1 flyer on turn 1, sometimes it does 4 or 5 damage to them. So
yeah, that's a really interesting point because we generally don't like the 1/1 flyers for one, even though if you do cast them on 1, they do something. They're okay. It's just the times when you draw them later and you're like, well, I didn't get that 5 or 6 damage and now this barely affects the board. Well, now it does, right? You jump a creature and smash them for a bunch.
So I still think green-black food could be a kind of tough matchup for the aggro decks. But if you're able to pressure them such that they can't effectively sacrifice the food, then yes, that can work out. And, just because you draft an aggro deck doesn't mean you have to have low card quality. You can have a black-red quote-unquote aggro deck that also just has 6 good removal spells and can just go to toe-to-toe with anyone.
Yeah, totally. And then, of course, depending, the interesting thing, too, is that, like, the rares and the uncommons that you see, they vary wildly on how well they fit into a more direct strategy like an aggro deck. So the good ones are insane. And then the other ones are like too expensive to be super effective in these decks, or maybe don't help your game plan specifically. So you have to be a little pickier there, but they can certainly get the job done. Anything else we want to hit before we start answering questions here?
One deck that I drafted even before this week, actually, that I wanted to mention when it comes to aggro is mono blue flyers, splashing a little bit of white. And when you're getting attacked by this deck, it does feel like an aggressive deck. When you have like Fairy Vandal into, Vantress Paladin, Arcanist's Owl, picking up Charmed Sleeps and Trapped in the Towers, it is pretty sweet. Mm-hmm. I think that mono blue, super nice. Getting a common Phantom monster, Vantress Paladin, is pretty big. And basically, whenever I've played against 4 islands in a row, I actually don't feel great. I think mono blue is just a good deck.
Okay. That's good to know. I'm always right on the edge. I've played mono blue once and it was amazing, but I felt like maybe it was just that deck. Like I had 2 of the owls and tons of stuff to get with it. So I thought maybe I was kind of just going off, and I haven't played it since. So I don't know. The question for me is Vantress Paladin, right? Like that's kind of the common payoff for being mono blue. And is it good enough? It's like right there. Like I haven't been blown away by 3/3 flyer for 4, but it's still really solid. So it's probably there. It's just close for me, I guess. I don't know. And you do consider that an aggro deck, by the way, the mono blue deck?
It can be. I don't think it has to be. Just it can turn out to be a flying deck where you're just pressuring them with flyers from the beginning. I think it's obviously easy to draft it as a control deck as well.
Okay, let's get into the questions here. Thanks to everybody who answered the call here, and let's just begin at the beginning. First one is from Starbright, who says, do you guys play Commander? If so, what's the most fun you've had with the format? And if not, are there any particular reasons why not? And then as a dumb follow-up challenge for Luis, make me hungry in one sentence, says Starbright.
Well, the Commander one's easier to answer. I have played Commander. I used to even have a Commander deck put together. I haven't played it in a while. My Commander was Draw New Lich Lord, which probably not a huge surprise. I even foiled out a bunch of the cards and everything. I got pretty into it. The biggest part for me was it's hard to find enough people to play consistently enough that I kept finding myself taking cards out for other decks. And, that's a slippery slope, right?
That's a death knell. Yeah, I had a bunch of Post-it notes in my Commander deck box, like IOU, foil preordain or whatever. Yeah, I did the same thing. Yeah, I don't play it much. I don't have a deck anymore. I also used to. In fact, Luis, you and I played it against each other. Do you remember this?
Yep, we played it on the Magic Cruise. This is the first time we really got to know each other.
That's right. That's right.
And you had a Teamer Commander deck. I think your Commander was like the Animar or whatever, but.
Damn, your memory is really good. Yes, it was in fact Animar, and you wiped the floor with me with withdrawal.
Oh well, but, I knew that. I think that's not a surprise to anyone. But
you didn't even need to remember that part, right? Yeah, I'm similar. My play group is really not into Commander at all, and I'm not super into it either. It's kind of like I appreciate it, but from a distance. One of the things that I have a hard time with is the political stuff, right? You get in there and there's deals being made and all this kind of stuff. And that's just like a big turnoff for me, generally speaking. I don't really get it. I don't like playing that type of thing where I'm trying to convince people to do stuff. Though I do recognize that there is a strategy to it and that there is a method to it that makes sense. It's just a little too easy to break. My favorite Magic Commander experience, of course, besides playing against you, Luis, was a bunch of judges. There was like 5 judges at a GP, and they were like, "Come on, play Commander with us." And I'm like, "I'm kind of busy, and I'd just gotten off of work for coverage and stuff." And they're like, "No, come play." I'm like, "All right, here's the deal." And I had a booster pack, and I was like, "I'm going to play, but here's the rules. The first person to kill me wins this booster pack." And they're like, "Okay." And so I just made myself the target for the entire table. And that was fun because they were highly motivated to try to win this booster pack for some reason. And it was awesome to see what some of these decks could really do when people were just like, I'm going to get the job done. And also to see how they kind of planned it out because, with 6 players at the table, it's like, you got to kind of get your shots in while you can. Are you going to make Starbright hungry or no?
I think the best the best way to here's the sentence. Imagine the smell of onions and garlic sizzling in a pan with like a little bit of butter.
Oh my god!
So I can smell that right now.
I can too. Actual?
Well, no. I mean, I just imagine that
in your mind. Okay, I was going to say that would be brutal if it was actual. That worked. David says, "How do you manage your collection of cards? Like once you're done playing with them in limited, and you've decided not to sell them back to CFB?
You would be so mad if you saw how I hold my collection of cards. It's unbelievable. I'll literally open a box, and the box will have a draft deck from a Pro Tour, a Beta Underground C, and then a stack of like playable standard uncommons, like a bunch of naturalizes and like incinerates and ponders and oblivion rings or whatever. And then I'll look at the next box, and it'll be like, this looks like half a vintage deck, but then the other half is clearly just all foil junk rares, and it just gets worse from there. Like,
oh my god!
You know the little like table where you put your wallet and keys, like when you come in the door.
Yeah.
Mine had a pile of just like top loaders with expensive cards in it that had been there for literally months. Just like, all right, throw my wallet on the Beta Shivan and then just keep going. Like,
dude.
And then at one point I was cleaning. I'm like, I should just probably put these in my super secret storage solution, which is a giant cardboard box that has a pile of cards in it. There's like, I don't know, man. Like I'm really bad about that. Whenever I have to find a card, I have to look through all my cards. Which is
you just have to look through everyone and have no method.
And I just have I have a pretty good memory, so I can remember like, okay, there's this group of cards that's this Splinter Twin deck I took apart 2 years ago. I think that's where my Snapcasters are, like that sort of thing. So.
Yeah, that's bad. For me, I actually try my hardest not to maintain a collection at this point. I don't really like just owning stuff for the sake of owning it. And if I'm not using the cards actively, then I'd rather just not have them around. There's a few that I really like to keep. I have my Canadian Highlander deck and some of the special cards that listeners have given me over the years, plus some just sentimental old cards and stuff like that I just enjoy having. But for the most part, if I can sell them back to CFB, I will. I don't want to have just like a pile of random rares because I don't play constructed in paper. I only play it online. So there you go.
I mean, I just want to say that Martin Juza, he's, for those of you who don't know, he's in the Hall of Fame. He has the most GP top 8s of almost anyone except for like Shuhai. And he's a limited player, and he's known for this. And one of the things that's so cool, he has every single deck he's drafted at a premier event.
Oh, that is awesome.
He's been playing Pro Tours for 15 years, GPs for 15 years. He has every single GP or Pro Tour deck like labeled and in his collection. I don't know exactly how he stores them, but I know he has all of them. I think he uses one of those like 5,000 count long boxes. It's so cool. Man,
I might have to do a video with him going through those because that's just awesome.
Yeah,
that is really
Andrew Cuneo, he's like in the MPL. He's like another really old school player, and is also doing well right now. He does the same thing. And when we were at his house once, me and I think it was like Reed or something just pulled out 2 old decks of his and just played them against each other. Just old limited decks. It was really sweet.
Oh, that's really cool. It
was like a limited deck from like a Pro Tour in like the 90s. Like, it's just
that's
awesome.
Insane. Nicholas says, when I'm playing a deck in the Uber style, how do I know when I've got too much stuff that doesn't affect the board, like card draw and ramp? Is this dependent on any other cards? Like if I have 6 good blockers and 5 good removal spells, I can play more card draw? Or is it just some objective cap?
So Uber is the ultimate big endgame.
Wait, what is it?
Ramp style of drafting.
Ramp, yeah, that's right.
Uber goes over the top of cabs as it does.
Indeed, but it's much slower.
So yeah, that's a reverse actually. But basically, yes, you're already thinking about it as Nicholas was it in a good way. Where the more Reeve Soul, Merfolk Secret Keeper type action you have, the more unexplained discoveries you can play because it's kind of a combo where. When you go blocker, removal, now your hand's empty. You really use a card draw thing, and you're probably at like 20 or 18 because you didn't let them hit you, so you can take a turn off to cast this. You flip it around, and your hand is all expensive cards. When you're at like 11 on turn 5, and they have 2 creatures and you have nothing, you can't really tap out to cast a card draw spell. So,
right.
I don't know if there's like a ratio. It kind of depends on the strength of your card draw too. A divination occupies a very different spot than a 5-mana draw 3. So because of divinations you can cast early, they can help you hit your land drops. They're more to smooth your draw than they are necessarily to pull ahead, though they do an okay job of that too. The 5-mana draw 3s or 6-mana draw 4s, these are the kind of cards you want once you've kind of already stabilized. So you only want a couple of those usually. Like you want, I think ideally, like if you just kind of got to pick, you'd want something like 2 divinations and 2 expensive card draw spells alongside like 4 or 5 cards that cost 2 or less and help defend you, whether it's a creature or a cheap removal spell, shock, Reave Soul, 2 mana, 1/4s, whatever it is. And then like probably like 3 or 4 cards in the middle of the game and then a couple good late game cards. So the ratio matters.
Yeah, that's a good, that's how I see it too, is I really do put a lot of pressure on how much my defensive cards cost. The more cheaper ones I have, the more card draw I can afford to run.
It's a good question, but it also sounds like you already got it because I think that the ratio that they said in the question was already pretty good.
Yeah, that was good, Nicholas. So yeah, you're on the right track. Just don't go too crazy. Alexander says, hey, Marshall and Luis, thanks for the great show you guys put on. What do you guys think is the best way to help white in limited? I'm a big fan of white in general and the red-white color pair more specifically, but lately it's just been bad. I haven't had much fun in these past few sets because when I sit down at the table, I know it's a bad choice to draft white or Boros.
So I think in Eldraine, it's actually fine. I think after taking a deeper dive, I've come around to it. Ardenvale Tactician's a hell of a card. More cards like that would be nice. Like cards that can pressure the opponent but also punch through damage are very good. See, I was talking about this on stream the other day. Part of the issue is white's share of the color pie often involves passivism type removal, which can vary in quality, especially depending on how good opposing like bounce is or how many creatures are that don't care about that. So like Runaway Together really cuts down on how good Trapped in the Tower is, right? You trap something and then it just sits there and then eventually they cast Runaway Together and they got a pretty significant advantage out of that. The other thing is how good both the white threats are and how good removal in general is. White's kind of at the mercy of other cards, other colors that if they have good removal, especially good removal against small things, what'll end up is, sure, white gets an aggressively costed cheap flyer, but there's like Reave Soul plus shock plus another thing, and all of a sudden it's like not looking that good. And I don't think it's unsolvable, and certainly white can be good in some sets. And again, I actually kind of like it right now. I think it really just depends on basically what are white's premium commons and how well do they match up against premium commons from other colors. Part of the problem in M20 is it turned out white, besides passive, just didn't have any good commons. All of its commons were just not very strong. And that when you end up there, you'll end up in a spot where other colors just get better picks than you.
Yeah, I like it when there's what is the Pegasus? There's just like 1 and a white 2/1 flyer alongside other good stuff like the Ardenvale Tactician. I like it when those sets pop up because then I don't feel silly, for trying to draft like a 2/1 on the ground or whatever that just, has a very short shelf life and no long-term possibilities to be.
I will note that especially if you go draft like at your local store or basically whenever you're drafting with humans, draft is self-correcting to a degree. And white hasn't been so bad where if you sit down and you're the only white drafter, you usually will have a good deck. So I think right now you can share white and still have a pretty good deck. So I'd say in general, white is a good deck to draft. It does run into issues if you're not in a spot where that matters. Like on Arena, it kind of doesn't matter how many people are drafting white. You're going to see the same kind of pool of cards regardless.
Yeah, exactly, which is a different topic, of course. William says, what would you recommend as a free alternative to Parallels for playing MTG Arena on a Mac? Love what you guys do, Billy. And interestingly, as often happens, a different listener, this time Chris, popped in and said, you can download and install Windows for your Mac for free. You can use Boot Camp Assistant, which is built into Mac OS, to install Windows, which you can download for Microsoft for free. Just Google Windows Download to get the installer. This is how I play Arena currently. And then he points out that if you do it that way, what happens is when you turn on your Mac, it asks you, do you want to load up the Windows side of your Mac partition or do you want to load up the Mac side of your Mac? And so you do have to decide one or the other. I still currently use Parallels to play Arena on both my laptop and on my computer. But as of the last maybe 3 weeks or whatever, it has struggled a little bit more. Arena seems to be a little bit less stable than it was. I've gotten a few crashes playing on both of those computers. But I don't think that that's Parallels doing that. I think it's just that we've seen a little bit of a performance increase demand from Arena for whatever reason. But I still recommend Parallels. At least it works for me still, and I've used it for a while. Peter says, how on earth could I lose to mono white aggro after listening to last week's show today?
The answer is mono white aggro is still good. If they have 4 Ardenvale tacticians, you're just going to be under a lot of pressure.
This is funny. Again, this one is also answered by a listener. Brian says, because everyone at your opponent's draft table listened to the show too and let him have all the white cards. That's a good answer. And also, same person, Brian says, hey guys, love the Eldraine content so far. This may be covered in a future show, but what cards in Eldraine go up in value in sealed compared to draft, and why? What cards go down? And you are right, Brian. We will cover that in the sealed episode.
Yeah, off the top of my head, though, just counter spells get better. Discard like Memory Theft gets better. You'll see pool by pool, but the monocolor incentives tend to get worse. It's just really hard to go mono and sealed. And I would definitely err on the side of main decking like a True Love's Kiss or other sort of disenchant in the main deck.
Yeah, I agree. I can't wait to play the Spectre. I forgot its name, but the 4/5 that blah blah blah. That guy,
the Reaper.
Don't fear the Reaper. I want to play the Reaper. Yeah, I would fear it in sealed for sure.
Well, it's great draft already. So
yeah, Jurn says, assuming you have 8 drafters, what do you think is the best size for a cube? 360 cards more?
540 by a lot.
Yeah.
So here's what 540 does: is it means every draft 2/3 of the cards are in play, which means you're likely to see any given card, but you're not guaranteed. And that really helps because it gives this nice sense of variance where I think 720, for example, is too big because you don't want to pick Kiki Jiki and half the time not see, other enablers, right? Like there's 4 other enablers, you only see 2 of them or whatever. But I also don't like when it's guaranteed where for a fact that everyone's natural order is going to get opened every single time. So I'm a pretty firm advocate for 540.
Also 540 fan. Janusz says, hi, what's your favorite music that you love but others know little about, like they rarely know what the band is or whatever? He says, for me, he says, we got Luis's answer. He says, for me, it would be Tesseract. I bet 3 boosters you don't know them.
I do not know Tesseract.
I don't either, but I also didn't agree to the bet, so I don't know what to tell you, Janusz.
No.
Right.
Janusz bet with someone else, clearly.
So your favorite music you just played for us, or is there somebody that you've been listening to that you like?
I've actually been listening to more kind of like Latin music. So like Ricardo Arjona is actually someone who's just a kind of an older singer at this point, but has a lot of really good songs.
Okay,
I think that's cool. Pretty well known among some people, but I would imagine on the listeners not quite as much.
What kind of music is it? Like upbeat, romantic? Is it?
It's
dance music.
No. It's more like romantic, like classical type music.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think you should Google and listen to. There's a couple good songs that I really like. So
okay, you'll have to tweet those or something because I want to hear now. The band I've been listening to lately is that maybe you didn't hear of is called Fontaines DC, and they're a band that former LR co-host Ryan Spain actually introduced me to, and we went to their concert a couple weeks ago here in Seattle, and they're awesome. What was that?
What?
Was that a yawn? Have you been adding to the soundboard? Oh my God, this is so brutal. You should check out Fontaines DC. I like them.
To be clear, that yawn was aimed at Marshall, not Fontaines DC, who I'm sure are excellent.
Yeah, okay. Nicholas says, now that the London Mulligan has been around for a bit, what new heuristic or ways of thinking about mulling have you adopted?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I don't know if I have a new heuristic, but I'd say the bar is noticeably higher. Less so in Limited, because in Limited, you still probably just shouldn't be mulliganing. But in Constructed, this is kind of what we feared, right? In Constructed, it feels like if your hand's not excellent, you can just mulligan it. Like if you don't have, like if you're playing Simic Food and you don't have an accelerant or Once Upon a Time, you just mulligan. Because you can just always find something. If you're playing Golos and you don't have Growth Spiral or Circuitous Rat or Arboreal Grazer, you can always basically just mulligan. I guess, Fertile Footsteps also. But for limited, I would say I'm way more prone to mulligan to like 5-land hands than I used to be. Like a hand of 5 lands, a 5-drop, and a 4-drop, it used to, I think, be a keep in some formats. Now I think it generally just doesn't, like, you can do better. Or a hand of like a 2-land hand with only 1 card that costs 3 and the rest are more expensive, I think maybe was a keeper before, but is just a mulligan now.
Yeah, just like, for me, it feels like doing the first mulligan is kind of not that impactful, but then going to 5 feels really extra bad. So I try really not to do that.
Yeah, that's a good
just
point
anecdotal,
too.
Though I don't actually know if it's worse. Or
I mean, the 6-card hand is just so much better than it used to be. I think the 5-card hand's not that much better because 5 cards already just sucks so much. But I think a 6-card hand now is like, I would actually be interested in if we could get these statistics. Like, it used to be that the difference between 7 and 6 was pretty big in terms of win percentage. You would think you were losing like something like 12%
or something.
What's that?
It was like 4% each side.
Yeah,
like 8% swing or something.
I think it was more like a 10 or 12% swing total.
Oh wow,
it was pretty big. But now I bet it's narrowed quite a bit.
Yeah, I guess we should probably, now that it's been around, start to see those type of articles pop up. Also, Chris popped in and said we should do a mulligan episode.
That sounds pretty good.
William says, been back at MTG since Dominaria. I've been playing mostly limited in Commander. I'm looking to build a Dominaria set cube so that I can redraft the set without having to drop hundreds of dollars every time. I'm looking to make a 540 card cube that focuses on the legends and has a 1 in 3 chance at a mythic. Any recommendations for cube creation or ways to make them more fun or consistent? What usually goes in the basic land slot? That last question first. Usually people just put another card in there. So most of the cubes that I play, you're drafting 15 cards rather than the 14 plus a land that you get in a normal set. So that's what most people do that I draft with. As far as making it more fun or consistent, as far as like the strategic parts, you're kind of on a track here with Dominaria. Like, it's already set up to do that. So just make sure that it's balanced, that you give each of the legends that you want to include in this, their fair shake as far as cards to support them. Because when you draft a normal cube, it's a very, very large subset of strategies that you can choose from, and you have to make some really tough decisions. But here, you're a lot more on rails since you're dealing with a much, much smaller subset of cards.
Yeah, you will start thinking like, oh, I'm going to curate the packs such that there's, X, Y, and Z. I think if you make a cube with good ratios, you don't have to even worry about that as much. Like, if you want the Dominaria experience, then yes, make a pack with 3 uncommons, or rare, or sometimes a mythic, and 11 commons, or what have you. But I think that the Dominaria cube would also be pretty fun if you did not curate the packs and just did 15 random cards. I bet that would work out pretty well too. So I would say most cubes, like Marshall said, they don't have a land slot as much as, probably like an eighth of the cube or something is lands, and or maybe sometimes higher. And then you just see 2 to 3 lands in every single pack randomly.
Right. Very common. Paul, you were right. We already answered his question. Bo says, what's your current strategy for building sealed? And the answer is, I don't know yet. I actually haven't done sealed outside of the first couple of events. So I have yet to dive into sealed, and we will be doing so probably coming up pretty quickly here, though.
I would say we should probably do it next week. So we'll see.
Okay.
We'll see though, because Marshall has to work at the Mythic Championship all weekend. I also have to spectate that. So I'm not sure how many sealed we're going to get in.
We're both working for ruthless dictators all weekend.
Yeah.
Ben Horkley says, this is a tough one. Related to the burrito discussion a couple of episodes back. Pack one, pick one. Which are you taking? Garlic or onions? Jeez, Ben.
Garlic, easy.
I'm definitely taking garlic, by the way.
Also, I mean, I know it's like a joke at this point, but like when a recipe says 2 cloves of garlic, do they really mean 2 cloves? Because I just put in like 15 cloves of garlic. Like,
they mean 2 of the little things that you pull off of like a bulb of garlic, not 15. 2.
But it's just like, what's the point?
I know. I usually like, you can safely double it for basically any recipe if you like,
and it tastes great.
Yeah. At some point it becomes not too much, because for me, you could put 8X in and it wouldn't taste more garlicky. It's just there's more garlic in it, which doesn't hurt my feelings. I'll tell you that. By the way, broccolini. Are you a fan of broccolini?
Yeah.
I've been kind of cooking it a lot. I don't know. Maybe I haven't really had it in my life, but I like it a lot better than regular broccoli.
Oh, I like them both. Broccolini is good too.
Yeah. Nikolai Bolas says, "Hey, Marshall and Luis, I love the podcast, and I firmly believe it helped me become not only a better player, but also a better human being." Awesome. Thanks for saying that, Nikolai. My question is this: what steps do you take to make sure commentary is entertaining? I always really enjoy watching coverage when you guys are on, and I'm wondering if there are any skills you consciously developed to be better at coverage, or if it's just something you got better at with practice. What's your favorite part of coverage? It was awesome to meet you at GP Vegas, and thanks for doing all you do.
Well, thanks a lot, Nikolai Bullis. That means a lot, and I also know you're always in, my stream or Gappy's stream or what have you, and that's appreciated too. Honestly, the biggest thing for coverage if you look at, there's some folks, me, you, Riley, like Gabby, these are the people who, if you watch them stream or do coverage, there is never dead air. Basically never. And I don't think that was a conscious choice. But I think we all adopted that. All of us have done a lot of solo content, which is streaming or videos, right? And then, you and I do the podcast. We are allergic to dead air.
Yes.
Here, I want to try a little experiment. Marshall, just say nothing until I say something.
I'm not going to be able to do it. Yeah, this is
didn't that make you go?
I don't like
didn't,
this.
Didn't that make you incredibly uncomfortable? That was 2 seconds, literally 2 seconds.
Yes.
So even though Marshall and I talk over each other sometimes, it happens more on the podcast because we can't see each other, whereas in a booth, you can tell when someone's about gearing up to speak. And we at this point are very well versed at kind of communicating that way. But honestly, just not having dead air is the first part. Obviously, you then also have to say things that are interesting. And we've developed some strategies. I think both of us kind of lean into examining why a player did something, not so much what they should have done. Because I don't think it's very useful. And I know a lot of commentators kind of go down this rabbit hole of really they should have shocked that creature last turn, and then they'd have a different block this turn. It's it's not interesting to hear about the game that could have been as much as, okay, they chose to do this because here's some of the things they may have been thinking about. And
exactly,
that's a lot more interesting to talk about. The other thing is just keep it entertaining. Throw in anecdotes. You're watching Venice play, tell a Venice story, that sort of thing. That's part of what I believe our jobs are to do, is to entertain and make use of the fact that we do know these people. And, humanizing them is really important because, it's awesome watching someone play and it's wow, they're really good at playing. That's kind of why we're watching them, right? But it's so much more fun when you get to talk about Andrea Mangucci's, cooking. Mangucci cuisine is a hashtag on Twitter where he shows off all this insane looking Italian food. I swear his family just sits by the seashore, cooking, freshly.
It's unbelievable.
Linguine vongole and whatnot. It's just what else do they do? Is that their job?
It is unbelievable the amount of awesome spreads that they get at dinner at the Mangucci house. There's no doubt about that. Yeah. I think that one of the skills that, I don't know if, are you playing a thing that says Half? Oh my God. I'm why is he just going off over there? Oh, wow. You really did put in some extra work, didn't you? One of the things that I like is, or that I think is really important, is that you have to, people, I give a lot of credit to the audience for knowing when you're faking it. If you come in and say, I'm really excited about something, you're no, you're not. I can tell you're not, right? If you're saying that, then you're probably not. You should know if somebody's excited because of the words they're saying and the way that they're talking. And I think that most human beings can sense intrinsically whether somebody's actually into something or not. And so what that means is you have to actually be into this stuff. You have to actually find this stuff fascinating. You can't just be yeah, he's going to attack, whatever. You have to actually be oh, wow, he's attacking here. What's going on? And you have to have that inquisitive kind of curious mind to be able to portray that in a genuine way. And if not, then it's just going to be yeah, he attacked.
I'm not going to lie. We do a lot of this stuff. You way more than me at this point, but both of us have put in our time, right? When it comes to being in the booth or being behind the mic here or podcasting. Yeah. And at no point are we completely burned out and just treating it like a job, because I think that's just not worth doing. And we both have the luxury of, we don't have to do it if we don't want to. So I mean, I'm not going to lie. Like when I went through a kind of rough patch a couple years ago, I think you could tell it on the podcast. I wasn't there. And, I do have to thank the listeners for bearing with me, you as well, Marshall, because, that was tough. And that was, my mind wasn't there. And I think it came through and I didn't like that, but right now, like we're doing these things because we want to actively be there and we want to engage with them. And nothing kills commentary faster than someone just being obviously bored or disdainful or whatever, because
or checked out.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're lucky enough to be commentating on a match of Magic and getting paid to do so. That's ridiculous. Like, how does that make sense? It's ridiculous.
Right. And so, those are things that I don't think that you necessarily can train for that, but like you have to have that approach or else it'll eventually come out. You can be excited for a tournament or two, but when you're doing your 40th tournament, you're going to be like, I'm here, I guess. That's just not going to fly. The next comes from Antonio, who says, I listened to both Marshall and Luis's Humans of Magic episodes, and I got to learn a lot about our beloved co-hosts. He says, no, or maybe he meant now, I'd like to know what a normal day is like for both of you. For example, in my case, I wake up, go to the office, answer some emails, and attend some meetings, but I think that it'd be boring in your cases. Congratulations on LR's 10th anniversary, by the way. These past days, my arena crashes a lot. Is it the same for you? And the answer is yes, it has been crashing a lot. Thanks for the congratulations on the 10th anniversary. And he wants to know what our day's like, Luis.
Well, one of my favorite sign-offs, by the way, is when we just took turns guessing each other's day.
Oh, yeah. That was great.
That was
an all-timer.
No, my day-to-day has changed since then. I'm no longer in the office every day, which I used to be. I get to do a lot of work from home. So an average day for me, well, I have my daughter here about half the time. And so an average day wildly varies depending on whether I get woken up at 7 a.m. by a 3-year-old versus not. But either way, I get up usually between 7 and 9 and do the whole breakfast routine, drop her off at daycare or not, and then get to work. And usually it starts by answering emails, and no one escapes that really. Checking Slack because at Channel Fireball, we do have folks from all over the world working. And so we have a Dublin office. So I'll wake up and see a bunch of Slack messages from, the guys in Dublin or whatever. And then I will, usually have a meeting. Like I still have plenty of meetings, even though it's from home. And then also, choose when to record like either the podcast or like some Magic Online or arena videos, depending on kind of what I feel like. That's the part I get the most choice over. Going back to the engagement part, I just record whatever it is I feel like recording. If I'm really into Modern, which I am right now, I'm doing a lot of Modern content because I just love playing it. So I went through a vintage bug a couple weeks ago, and at some point I'll either cook a meal or sometimes go out for a meal, and then that's kind of how it goes towards the evening. It doesn't actually change much in the evening. Sometimes I'll play Magic without recording it, as opposed to actually recording it, and then really make sure that I all the projects I'm working on kind of spin down. One thing that I think is okay, but I think long-term might not always be okay, is I take a lot of work home, as it were, quote unquote. So I do a lot of work at night too. Like the line for both of us can blur between work and not work, but I'm so invested in all the things I'm doing that, sometimes I'll be up till midnight working, even though that work can be writing articles or what have you, that still is work, but is, at what point is play testing for a tournament work versus not work? I choose not to really think of it as work, but I certainly do spend time on it.
Yeah. Yeah. My schedule is just shifted towards the night, basically. Like I wake up at usually like 10.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
me and Paul will usually have a couple hours of messages, in the group chat by then.
I know, and then I wake up and I'm like, 99 missed messages. All right, let's catch up on what these two jokers are up to.
This is true of anyone who's in a group chat, but it is really funny that what will often happen is 2 of the 3 of us will start going ham, and the third will look and to see like 99 plus messages. Oh, come on, guys.
Yeah, it's like, come on, guys. Yeah, and I'll get caught up on that. I do spend a good amount of time. I wake up really slow. Like if I don't have to like get out, I'm just like, man, I'm not a morning person. I hate it. And then I'll kind of get going. I'll usually come in and do some like upkeepy stuff for LR, like you mentioned, emails, getting caught up on that, businessy stuff, taxes and all that kind of stuff. And then I'll do some like I do thank you cards for the patrons on LR. So I need to, get the addresses moved in and ship those out and all that kind of stuff. So I'll try to get caught up on that stuff. Then I'll have lunch. I'll often go with my friend Adam or somebody down here, or I'll make something or go buy something. And then I'll usually try to do like a video or like I have to do a lot of playing of Magic to stay up to speed on the stuff that I do. So like I have to draft a bunch so that when we come to the show, I know the format. And like, for example, this week, right after the show, I'm going to the airport to go to the Mythic Championship, which is all standard. And so I've been playing league after league after league with all of the different standard decks that I can, that I could realistically fit in. So that I actually have a relevant idea of what's going on when I get in the booth. And so that actually takes up a lot of time. That's one of the sort of hidden things about commentary is that, in order to be properly prepared for it, you have to do a bunch of reading and playing and studying of the card names in some cases, to make sure that you're ready to go. So I do that if there's an event coming up. And then in the evening, I often play basketball about 3 times a week. If I'm home, I'll go play basketball or have, other stuff. The evenings actually end up filling up pretty quickly for me. I'll go hang out with people or do whatever. So that's like a pretty average day. It's sort of like rarely very high stress, but kind of there's just background all the time. Like, cause like what Louis said, I just don't really separate out.
I mean, there's
like, I don't have a time when I go, I'm not working.
I saw a Twitter thread where someone was like, does anyone know, about a good way to really separate work and life? And you're like, if I knew that, I would obsessively do that.
Yeah. So yeah. And then I should mention though that I stay up really late. So usually at about 9 or 10 is when I'm really kind of cooking. I'll be doing a hobby, like I'll be doing watch stuff, or I'll be working or doing a video or editing or coming up with an idea or planning something. That's kind of when I'm cooking. I usually go to bed about 3 or 3:30 at night. John says, could you guys share your approach to building mana bases for limited? For example, when do I play 16, 17, or 18 lands? How many sources of a color? How should I adjust my number of lands when the set includes mana, rocks, or spells and fetch lands? That's a pretty big topic, John, but we can give you the
quick and dirty is you should be 9/8 most of the times in most formats in your 2-color deck, because basically to be 10/7 or more, you need to have few doubles in the or none in the color with fewer lands, and have a lot of early needs for the other color. This is actually a format where I find myself going 12/5 or like 13/4 more often. The other,
which is really bizarre. Yeah, that's rare.
It's just because you have these like triple and quad color spells, and you really want to.
But how many formats has that been the case?
Not very many. I mean, rare. The last time we saw hybrid, we saw some of it too. In terms of 17 is the baseline, it's obviously the heuristic right there. 18 is if you have good ways to not flood out. The more card draw you have, the more you can go to 18 lands and good ways to use your mana late. 16 is when your curve stops around 3 mostly and a couple 4s, maybe 1 5, and you have no mana sinks, then just run 16. And the other thing about 16 is I don't like running 8/8 all that much. I would much rather run like a 10/6, because once you get like that, part of the issue that you can't, or the reason you can't run like 15 or 16 land is that you won't have the right colors. If you're monocolored, you could actually run 15 land a lot of the time. It depends on how your curve is, of course, but part of the reason we run 17 land is because you need 8 or 9 sources of your colors. Like,
right.
If you were able,
and oftentimes they're just basics.
If you were able to make a red-black deck and had all Badlands, all red-black duels, like you just got to play, 15 Badlands, you could play a 15 or 16 land deck a lot more often than now. It's just that you actually need the mana. Like your limited mana bases are so bad, you just don't want to draw 3 mountains and 0 forests in your red-green deck.
Yeah, it's pretty typical for that too. Forrest says, what's the best way to stay open in this format? At the start of a draft, should I prioritize playable colorless cards or take the best card in any color? And the answer is, it's subtle. It's something that you saw in the Crack-A-Pack today, where we opened a decent gold card with the Inspiring Veteran, but we decided to, take something that was monocolored over it. In this case, it ended up being the Troll, which is a different story. But, we would have also taken the Burn Spell or the Mad Ratter over it. And that's a tiebreaker. That's a way that you can default to stay more open so that you don't shoehorn yourself in. For Luis, he felt like the Mad Ratter also shoehorned him into 2 colors a little bit too much and would prefer to take a card that he knows for sure he can play in any red deck, which is that burn spell, where the Mad Ratter, you can play it in a red-black deck. Sometimes you get some loots or some rummages or whatever, but it's not nearly as good. So he's willing to do that. That's how you stay open. You don't go crazy and take colorless cards just to be open. Being open is a constant risk analysis. It's a risk reward analysis that you're running on it. And the upside has to be there too, right? Because if all that mattered was that you were open, you would just take all artifacts, right? You'd just be like, well, I'm open. That's the most important thing. It's not. It's a combination of that with the potential power level that you could get and the percentage chance that you get to actually play these cards.
Yeah, I would generally not look to pay too many costs to stay open, but it also depends how many colors you have or cards you have of the same color. Because imagine we first pick like Dragonfire, second pick another Dragonfire, and then third pick another like medium red card, and then fourth pick I'm a lot more inclined to take a red card over like a decent blue card. Obviously, if you see something really good, that's a good signal. But like once you're pretty deep on a color, it's so awesome being able to go into pack 2 with like 10 red cards. Because then if you open just about any bomb in another color, you can kind of take that as your second color.
Right. Ryan says, I was planning on ordering an out-of-print box of a favorite set like Khans or Theros or something. Wow, those are two different sets. To draft. Draft.
Or order Khans, not Theros.
Yeah, get Khans to draft, and noticed there's a few that stores have for a decent percent less than the original retail price. I assume due to extra stock, as the set maybe was undersold, like Born or Journey from Theros Block, Dragons from Tarkir, and of course Dragon's Maze. So my question is, do you think I could still get enjoyment out of one of these cheap boxes? And if so, any tips for using them? Worth solo boxing a draft of a small set just to see what happens? Generally speaking, I would say no, Ryan. Triple small set draft it was never designed in most of these cases to be drafted as such. And if you do find an old set that was the smaller subset of cards, think about 150 cards versus 250 cards, and you're trying to draft them, it can be entertaining. You asked for enjoyment. It can be funny, but it's not good. It's not repeatable. It's not good. And you'll find some absolutely stupid stuff that will happen that will probably make you laugh, but it won't be a really great limited experience. So I would avoid it. I've done those. They used to offer those sometimes on Magic Online and stuff. And I've done a lot of triple small set, and I would describe it as silly and unbalanced. It's not really great.
It is a D+ experience in my experience.
Yeah, I agree. All right, a couple more questions because I got to go to the stupid airport here. Harry says, longtime listener, first-time caller. Did you? Yeah, well, you can sit here and answer questions if you want. Did you have a chance to try drafting aggro decks in Throne of Eldraine yet? As you mentioned last show, been enjoying White plus Other because of Fairy Guide Mother.
I mean, I do like the Guide Mother. It's not as good as the Tactician, but they both fill the role of getting extra damage through. So yeah, I mean, I'm a lot higher on it than I was last week. I just hadn't spent enough time really focusing on that.
Yeah, Atticus says he also took the challenge and noted that he's a slow deck player, so it was a little bit difficult for him. And the hardest decision points that he had, he said, many of which I only realized that I aired on later, were those that involved taking the fast move over the maximum value. For example, playing a 2/1 on turn 2, even though it is an adventure, when you haven't cast the adventure half of it yet, or discarding more expensive cards to the Fear the Reaper, which is what he called it, by the way, since I'm a couple of lands away. In Limited, when you can't always rely on curving out, can you discuss these decision points a little bit? Interesting. I struggle with this stuff too. These decision points end up being a lot more, they have a lot more weight on them. The aggro decks can be a lot less forgiving than a mid-range deck can be, where you'll often be able to sort of change course again later on, where if you miss some damage or you make the wrong attack in an aggro deck, it can often see your entire game plan kind of just fall apart in front of you. So I definitely feel you there, Atticus. Like I said on the show, at least for this set, I had been erring on doing the more aggressive thing most of the time. Like I would play the 2/1 for 2 on turn 2 if I didn't have another play, rather than think, oh, well, I'm just going to kind of switch to a mid-range plan where I'm going to get value. I was just like, no, I need to pressure you before your food tokens come online, basically.
I think one of the biggest keys for aggro is don't worry about getting max value from all your cards, because in a control deck, getting the most value from your cards is like one of the most important things you can do. In aggro, there's getting value, but there's also dealing damage. And as long as you're dealing enough damage, that often makes up for any loss of value you have. So playing your 2/1 on turn 2 and not getting the adventure bonus of getting to cast as a combat trick, well, if you do an extra 4 to 6 damage, that's better than the combat trick. And you do have to kind of keep that in mind. So be prepared to make plays that maybe aren't the most value laden, but that, I mean, pushing through damage, throwing away creatures. Like, I've played a lot of aggro decks, and it's not that I love doing that, but you just have to know when it's a good time to shove.
For sure. And that is, those judgments are tough. We'll end with potentially one of the more controversial questions we've got from Chris, who says, I've been listening for about 9 years, and I love the work you both do for the game and the community. What do you feel is the importance of diversity and inclusion in the game and the community, and how can we all work towards a more diverse and inclusive environment? And this is something that we have actually talked about on the show. We try not to talk about it too often because it can be kind of a distraction from the core values of the show, which is, to get you better at Magic, to enjoy it and that kind of stuff. And we like to keep the show as focused as we can. But that being said, we have certainly taken time to address this issue before, because it's one that's very important to both Luis and I.
I would definitely not say it's against the core values of the show. It's more that we do plenty of...
I didn't say it was against the core values of the show. I said it distracts from the focus of the show, which is to, get you.
I think basically,
we could talk about politics too, right? But because that's important
that I
to
would
both
find less useful.
But anyway, what I was saying is this is something that is very important.
It's incredibly important.
And I. And go ahead.
No, I'm going to wait till you start. Then I'm going to interrupt you. So go for it.
Yeah. No, I'm not going to fall for that. You're going to go.
Fine. No, look, to get to the core of it, I think it's really, really valuable, awesome, and makes the experience a lot better if there is diversity among and basically if everyone gets to enjoy Magic and form this community, because the community aspect is really important, and you can't really call yourself, I think, a community in good faith if you're excluding people, which does happen. There's no way around it. I mean, every community has its issues, and Magic certainly hasn't always been the most welcoming to people who basically aren't like white dudes. And I think that it's not necessarily even out of malice in a lot of cases. It's just these are really the structures are made. And look, Magic intrinsically has some issues like that too, because it's expensive. We joked about it earlier on the show, right? If Magic is really expensive, that cuts out a lot of people who won't be able to enjoy it. And I think that there are ways to make it more, inclusive. I think it's really cool that Magic clubs at like schools are set up to give kids a lot of cards and show them how to play and kind of introduce them to Magic without spending money. Similarly, I think making sure that you kind of are as best you can an advocate for people to join the community is important. And when you see someone saying something that makes someone else uncomfortable or is exclusionary, being as forceful as you can, and sometimes that involves stepping out of your comfort zone, really means a lot. Because it's not that you're necessarily trying to convince the mind of the person you're arguing against. If someone says something like racist or homophobic and you argue with them and you're just like, hey, that's not cool, we don't do that here, that's not a cool thing to say, you won't necessarily change that person's mind. If you do, that's great. But it's for the person who's watching that and thinking like, oh, what is acceptable here? What do people care about? You never know what your words might mean to someone else. And it could be that someone's sitting there feeling really uncomfortable when this person is being unpleasant. And if no one says anything, they're just not going to come back next time. And it doesn't matter whether or not they're in the groups that are being targeted. Sometimes they are, because it's not always even visible. But it matters how those things are received. And a lot of it has to do with the local level. Just because, look, we've both been in card stores. It can range from great and inclusive, and like, you go to Mock's boarding house, and they're like, it's really important. You go to any event these days. Like, one of the big things that I know CFB events pushes for is making sure people feel comfortable there. That said, I've been in these like card shops that are just like boys clubs that have a lot of that can be not welcoming, and it so happened that I was among the group that was welcomed by default, so I was able to exist there. If I wasn't, I don't know how different that would have been.
Yeah, I remember the first time I went to an LGS, I didn't feel welcomed at all. And like you said, I'm in the group that
you're like
is
a late
supposed
20s
to be. Yeah, it was like and I walked in and I felt like really uncomfortable, but it was interesting because I really liked playing live, but also I wanted to beat. They were kind of jerks, and so I wanted to beat them at Magic. But like I can imagine, like that's how I happen to react. But a lot of people don't react that way. They say, "I'm not going to go back." Like they weren't like out of line calling me names or, going, but they didn't make me feel like I belonged there. They certainly weren't nice to me. I mean, they rules lawyered me on the first time I was there. Didn't explain it properly and left me going home feeling like I got scummed or something. It was like, there was no welcoming anything in that.
Let me tell you a story about, I was in college. I had not played Magic for a number of years. I decided to do a draft at the local game store. My first opponent counted my deck, pile shuffled, counted my deck. It was 39. I screwed up. I got a game loss. And then the whole match was like full of rules lawyering. I left and didn't play Magic for another year. And like, this is me. Yeah. I go on to be one of the most competitive people, right?
Right. It's unbelievable.
And that still was a barrier that kept me out. And it happened that I went back because I decided, no, Magic is too fun. I should just go back. But that was such an unpleasant experience. I didn't go back for a year. A whole year. I could have started playing a year earlier.
It's awful.
I'm not saying that would have been better. Butterfly effect and all that. But my point is, this wasn't even being not inclusive based on any characteristic. It's just being like, don't be a competitive jerk. Like,
right.
Look, it's all well and good to want to win. I want to win too. When I play a match of Magic, unless I'm playing for fun, when I play in a tournament, I do want to win. And I'll be honest, I did want to win back then when I played at local store drafts because that was my highest level of competition. But that didn't extend into me being a jerk to my opponents. And there are plenty of ways within the rules to be a jerk. Don't do those either, right? Don't try to be a complete stickler. Don't call a judge over every infraction. Call a judge when something happens that you need to call a judge for. I'm definitely not saying don't call a judge, but, judge my opponent's shuffling too slow or whatever, just like kind of like the nonsense intimidation factors people can do. So this goes in a lot of directions, and I don't know.
I think for me, the big picture that I try to do for the podcast is I try to walk the walk more than bother with talking the talk. The way I see it is this, and this is probably a byproduct of living in the United States in 2019, which is just that like there is so much language and words and facts and everything flying around that it can become really overwhelming and a little bit disillusioning to just try to engage in every one of these conversations and follow what our president is saying and what he's not and all this stuff. And it's like, look, I need to retreat a little bit and get back down to like, what's at the core of this, right? And for me, that's action, right? If I have to go on Twitter and say, hey, you shouldn't be mean to other people or something like that. It's like, you're an idiot if you didn't already know that, or if you didn't like, I'm not the type, you should know that I'm not the type of person that thinks it's okay to exclude people, be mean to them, denigrate them, do anything like that. Like that, to me, if you aren't on that level, I just don't want to interact with you at all. Like that is the starting point. That is not I've come to the conclusion that we should be inclusive. It's like that should have been where you were at the beginning. Now, if you're not, I'm happy to sit down and have a chat with you about why I think that's important. But I don't think that blasting that off on social media or on the podcast is what needs to happen. What actually needs to happen is when people need your help, you give it to them, right? When I meet somebody who's in a less represented group, who has an opportunity to maybe take part in our community in a meaningful way through a job or an opportunity, behind the scenes or something, I'm going to take whatever influence I happen to have to try to make that happen. Because to me, that's building a foundation. That's actually doing things that over the long term make change. And that's what I care about, right? I want that in another, like I've seen the last 5 years go to a GP, and it is way better than it was 5 years ago on diversity and everything. There's tons of different type of people enjoying our game. And I'm like, in 5 more years, I want to see that trend continue.
Agreed.
Right. And so I'm going to do the things that I think will make that happen. And, talking about it all the time is fine. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. It's just not my way.
To be honest, us talking about it helps. And, I think it's really important that we do walk the walk, and I think that matters too, but us talking about it does help. And I'm glad that, I can't remember the name now because I don't have the sheet in front of me. I'm glad the listener asked this question. It was Tom, I think. But
it was Chris. Yeah. So thanks for that, Chris. We do appreciate it. And I do appreciate the platform, right? To be able to say, just so everybody knows, and that there's no, like, this matters to us a lot. And I know that you have as well, have done many things behind the scenes to make sure that we're doing everything we can to help in this space. And it is important.
Yeah. And look,
thanks again.
It's worth clarifying too, because if you've listened to any amount of the podcast, we're very much on the live and let live, everyone do their thing, sort of thing. And this is not something like that. Like we've said before, this is not live and let live. People can be jerks. We're not going to say anything. That's where it kind of ends for me. Like if you,
not in our community, right? Not in our space.
Right.
Yeah.
If someone, I'm all for it. If you can do whatever you want, basically, as long as you're not hurting other people. But once you hurt other people, that does cross a line. And hurting can definitely mean the attitude you project and the things you say.
That's right. Yeah. Well put. So let's end there.
Well, actually, I got a question from Zach H. So he wanted to know, Marshall, in your opinion, who is the greatest thief in the multiverse?
From Zach H, spelled Z8.
Wait, what was that? Hold on. Wait, hold on.
Jack Bateman, the greatest thief in the multiverse.
Oh, okay. My God. That was the research you were doing before the show? You found me reading that stupid...
The greatest thief in the multiverse.
Oh, my God. This is so embarrassing. Can I end the show now, please? Can this be over?
The greatest thief in the multiverse.
Okay.
Oh, my God. I'm going to have to find a new way to record the show. This will not stand. I can't believe you actually took the time, especially somebody like you. You're just so lazy. There's no way you would actually dig this thing up, and then you did.
I had to go through the depths of the YouTube archives for a clip from the 2013 World Championship, and it delivered.
Wow. All right. Yeah, if you say so. That's going to do it for the show this week. If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR. And you don't need to ask me about the greatest thief power rankings on social media. That's okay. You're fine. Luis is LSV. And of course, you can tweet at him to tell him how offended you were by this abuse of the soundboard, because I know everybody's going to be upset about it.
That's true. If you just tweet at both of us your opinions of the use of the soundboard here, I would love to hear them.
No, that is not what I asked for. The show is brought to you by channelfireball.com. That's the place to go for all things magic related. Make sure you check out their buy list at channelfireball.com/buy list for that sweet 40% trade-in bonus if you've got some cards sitting on that desk or maybe on your little key stand when you come into your place. And especially if you have some beta duels, maybe you want to sell them. Check it out. See what they'll give you for them over at channelfireball.com/buy list, and check out the coverage of Command Fest Seattle coming up at the end of the month, or beginning of next month, I should say, with Krim. So that'll be cool. And that's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for hanging out. And also, we'll see you at the Mythic Championship this weekend. If you're listening the week before that, starts on Friday. We'll see you there.
So when thinking about the Mythic Championship, I'm thinking about the format. And we just got the deck list. It's 29 Golos decks out of 68 decks. And 92% of the decks have forests in them. Forest is the most played card. So it's going to be interesting seeing how that plans out. It's basically Golos versus Oko with a side of Weaselback Redcap. There actually are a bunch of decks playing the tricolor Knight deck. Mardu playing, it's red 1/1 for a Knight Goblin that I think it's 1 in a red, pump +2/+0. So
that's it.
There we go.
That's what it does.
Weaselback, a little Weasley.
Yeah.
And I am worried that in 2 weeks when Field of the Dead gets banned, which is my prediction, that Oko is going to kind of run rampant. And it made me think of what if bans kind of function a little bit differently? And I guess this is a little bit more for modern than it is for standard, but imagine more quality of life bans as kind of like content. And here I'll list the upsides. I know the downsides too. I'll list those as well. But imagine like Stoneforge Mystic got unbanned, right? But it got unbanned at the same time that a bunch of other stuff happened, like Faithless Looting getting banned. Imagine if they just didn't do that. Let everyone adjust to the Faithless Looting metagame, then unban Stoneforge when nothing else was going on. Like, wouldn't that just make Modern more interesting more often? You already were banning looting. There already was Throne of Eldraine coming out. There's already going to be these changes. Imagine if you just waited on Stoneforge to when things had kind of gotten boring.
Yeah, I think it depends on if you view banning a card as a cost or a benefit, because you're kind of framing it as a benefit, like it's interesting to shake things up. But I think that they try to lump their costs together so it doesn't hit. It's not like, oh, they had to do another ban and another ban. That's like almost like a PR thing or something.
Yeah, I understand that, and I like I said, I'm very cognizant of the downsides. One of which is like, especially when bans as opposed to unbans. Look, when your deck gets banned and you spent $800 getting the deck together, and now the deck doesn't work anymore. Yes, I know that sucks, and I think that's bad. And that's like the main thing holding me back from like thinking like, yeah, maybe Mox Opal should get banned. It's like, yeah, it's interesting to say from a theory perspective what happens, but for the person who's saved up for 3 months to build this deck and then all of a sudden it's unplayable, like you made a Wurza deck and now none of your cards are good anymore. Like, yeah, I feel for you. I'm not arguing for that. That is, of course, an argument for digital as opposed to paper. But I don't know. I just thinking like, imagine bans not only happening when there was like a big issue that was needed correcting, but just more quality of life bans or unbans in the case of Modern. I think unbans are also really powerful. So that said, I'm not looking forward to Oko Winter, but we'll see what ends up happening. Look, for as much as a pair of people who like food, I don't think I'm not sure how much elk we can stomach.